After almost 2 months of political deadlock, French President Emmanuel Macron finally named a new Prime Minister, Michel Barnier. It marked the end of the longest government transition period in the country's history. Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, naming a new Prime Minister was a positive first step, but France has many problems, from huge public debt to immigration and an economy that needs growth. Let's take a closer look at why it took so long to appoint a new Prime Minister and who is this new leader.
France has had more than 2 months of political deadlock without an effective government. The delay caused concern in the country, with many wondering why it was taking so long to make a decision. One reason was fragmentations within the French National Assembly. After the last parliamentary elections, there was no clear majority, with President Macron's alliance falling short of the majority needed and could not pass any legislation. The left-wing New Popular Front and the far-right National Rally gained an important number of seats. This made searching for a candidate to become Prime Minister difficult, while the government tried to avoid an immediate vote of no confidence. The Prime Minister Barnier is an experienced politician. He previously worked as Foreign, Agriculture and Environment Minister. He also served as the EU's chief Brexit negotiator, becoming known as Monsieur Brexit.
It will be about responding as much as we can to the challenges, anger that you talked about, to the suffering, to the feeling of abandonment, injustice that runs far too much through our cities, our neighbourhoods and our countryside.
And now, what role does Barnier play? In France, the Prime Minister is the head of government, who implements the President's policies and manages the daily state affairs. Even though the President has significant executive power, the Prime Minister forms a cabinet, leads legislative efforts, and steers France through economic and social challenges. But the challenges for Barnier go beyond fiscal policy. Paris is grappling with issues from immigration and security to the cost of living. The new French government signals a shift to the right. Key positions are held by the Conservatives, including Interior and Finance ministers. The French Assembly is still divided, and making legislation is not easy. Opposition parties continue to threaten a no-confidence vote, while protests and dissatisfaction grow from both the left and right. Now only time will show whether this new cabinet can bring stability to the country, or whether it falls as the threat of no-confidence vote looms closer.
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining me from Saint-Malo in northern France is Jacques Reland. He is a senior research fellow at the Global Policy Institute. In Paris, we have Nabila Ramdani. She's a French journalist and the author of Fixing France: How to Repair a Broken Republic. Also here with me in the studio is Nigel Nelson. He's a political commentator and the former political editor of the Sunday Mirror newspaper. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Nabila, I'll come to you first of all. I mean, Michel Barnier, he spent years conducting Brexit negotiations with the British Conservatives, and now he's walking into quite a political mess in France. He seems to have a great appetite for political punishment.
Yes, indeed. Of course, Michel Barnier has tremendous experience as the EU Brexit negotiator, and I think his influence, he will bring that kind of influence into his new role as a Prime Minister of France and into his leadership style, dare I say. And it will certainly influence his approach to foreign policy, and in particular, the relations between the UK and the EU. I mean, he was being a Brexit negotiator is clearly a technocratic job. It's all about applying ideals to the real world and making things happen. And Mr. Barnier was a a low-key negotiator and one who was pretty well respected, dare I say, on both sides. And he will certainly want to bring this image to his new role as a Prime Minister of France. It has to be said that he's very much a classic Gallic Europhile, somebody who has grown up with the European project and who will continue to strive to make it as successful as possible. And I think there is no doubt that he knows the British quite well after all those negotiations over Brexit. And I think that the British will be quite wary of him, to be honest, because he's clearly far more interested in the EU and in the European project's success than in Britain's.
Jacques, critics in France are saying that President Macron has simply recycled the election losers and created this government. Is that a fair criticism?
It can be said. It's very true. You just have to look at the figures. The Prime Minister and nearly half of his cabinet come from a party who only got 9% of the vote in the parliamentary election. Only has 60 MPs out of 580. So it's quite amazing. And so it created a government. It's a minority government because it has the backing of the Republicans, so that's 60 MPs, and at the backing at the moment of the ex-presidential majority, which represents about 170 people, and it's a government which is 70 votes short of a full majority, and a government which face on its left side the LFI and the left, who are very angry because they came first in the vote at not being chosen to try to form a government, even if that government probably would not have lasted very long. But they represent 180 MPs, and you also have the National Rally or National Front with around 140 MPs, but who gathered 37% of the votes in the parliamentary election, while the presidential party only got about 25%, and the MPs, the right, 9%. So you see, difficult. So he will he will have a very difficult task in Parliament to push through some of his text. And now we have a situation where in July, the French rejected the National Rally, rejected it totally, and that was the good thing about it. Everyone thought that the National Rally was going to win the parliament or come first and probably form a government. But then the French had a Republican reaction, say, we can't allow that. We can't vote, just especially at the time of the Olympics, for a government which is contrary to all the Republican values which we've been defending for ages. So now this government, the French kicked out the National Rally, but the National Rally is in a position to bring down this government at any time, but only if they can ally with the left, and that will be that's something that probably the left will find difficult to vote against the government. But who knows? On a certain text, they could bring down the government together, especially on the pensions reform, which is so dear to President Macron, where both of them in their program oppose and want to put an end to this reform rather than amend it. So difficult task, difficult political balance in Parliament, and also obviously he will have very difficult task ahead because France is in a precarious fiscal position with a deficit of close to 7%. There's under European procedure, but that European procedures they criticize. But at the same time, yes, he has to find economies for fiscal balance of about 30 billion euros this year, and that won't be easy. And the big test for him will be on the 1st of October when he presents his budget, and the budget there will be the acid test of his economic policies, and which will
we'll come back to France's finances in a moment, okay? Nigel, you covered Brexit negotiations for years. Give us your impression of Barnier. I thought he did a very good job for Europe.
Well, me too. I mean, the whole thing was, first of all, Barnier thought that Brexit was a huge mistake, both for Britain and for Europe. So he started from that kind of principle. The point was, the British, after we voted for Brexit, didn't quite know what sort of Brexit we wanted. So in the early days, there was a lot of messing about by suggesting that we might be able to go into the single market, but we didn't want freedom of movement, or we might look at a customs union, but we didn't want to be hampered with trade with the rest of the world. Barnier made absolutely clear that that wasn't on. There are the rules that every EU country has to abide by. We couldn't, as he put it at the time, have our cake and eat it.
And how do you think he will fit in now? You know, this is obviously quite a strange move by President Macron, bringing a 73-year-old out of retirement. I think one last big gig for him. Do you think he can do it?
Yes, I do, actually. And I think that what Macron needed was somebody with real political experience to negotiate the problems he's facing. So you've got the most fractured assembly now in recent history, that Barnier's got to negotiate a pretty dodgy no confidence vote, could easily come his way. He's got the budget to put forward on October the 1st. That's going to be really difficult. He's got to try and line up the centre, the right and the far right, and get a budget through that may include tax rises, may include spending cuts. The right don't want any tax rises, they want tax cuts. It's going to be a difficult one. So what he needs to do is, if it comes to that no confidence vote, what he'll have to do is make sure that the National Rally will turn around and abstain from it. Otherwise, he's got a problem.
Nabila, how does the average French voter feel after everything that's been going on for weeks and weeks now? Because what's happened really, it doesn't make anyone happy.
Yes, I think a pretty scandalous aspect of the new government is that it is an attempt by Mr. Macron to respond to democracy, but he has done the complete opposite. The left clearly won the most seats in the parliamentary elections of 2.5 months ago, but they're nowhere near the government. And every single MP in the new Popular Front, the left-wing coalition, which effectively won the election, are excluded. And instead, we have a group of relatively unknown losers who came fourth and indeed last at the election, and all of them headed by Mr. Barnier, which didn't even take part in the parliamentary election. So the last time he stood in an election was to be the presidential candidate in his Republican Party in 2022, and he just got 5% of the vote among party members. And I suspect if he would get even less now if he stood in a nationwide election today. But just to give you the full picture about why Macron appointed Barnier, in a way, in fact, Mr. Barnier is not a political appointment. He's not a strong ideologue. He's much more of a pragmatic public servant, a realist, was brought in by Macron to sort out France's huge problems right now, not least of all its overspending. So when Mr. Macron chose Barnier as his prime minister, it was to make sure that he would in turn choose a government, the kind of government that Mr. Macron wants. And the Prime Minister of France is nominally the head of the government, but it is in fact the president who has ultimate power. And Mr. Macron will be calling all the shots of what ultimately he views as a technocratic government there to enforce his views. And it might well be that Mr. Macron will carry on ruling by decree, by presidential decree, and not even consulting Parliament.
Jacques, you're shaking your head. Just tell me on that point then, is Barnier just a puppet of Macron? As you say in French, une marionnette.
No, not in a way. The Constitution states clearly there is the Prime Minister who conducts the politics of the nation. Yes, and is appointed by the President, and which Macron. But this time, the strange thing, generally, the president appoints as prime minister, the representative of the majority in parliament. That was the case when Chirac, Gaullist, appointed Jospin as prime minister in 1997. Jospin had a majority in the parliamentary election. He was forced to, but this time he did not have that possibility. So it shows Barnier. Barnier, yes, Barnier was the rare bird, someone who maybe could not get censored at the first opportunity. And the thing is, Barnier is a right-wing man, and the government is a right-wing government. You already feel tensions within this government between its right-wing. Now, you have two cohabitation, a cohabitation between Barnier and Macron, but you have cohabitation in the government between the Republicans, who are very close to the National Rally on many issues, such as immigration and law and order, and cohabitation with the center-right, the ex-Macronists, led by Gabriel Attal, who are far more liberal socially and very keen on societal values. And already Gabriel Attal has warned Prime Minister Barnier not to try to amend or restrict laws concerning sexual freedom, abortion, etc., which many in the Republicans opposed against homosexual marriage, for example. Barnier voted against, and quite a few of the many Republicans in this government who are far more right. So you already have tension, and this tension is illustrated by the appointment of two key ministers. The Home Secretary, none other than Benoît Retailleau, really very close ideas. His ideas are very close to the National Front. When he came in yesterday, he said his three priorities were order, 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 and sends message that it will be tough on immigration and so on. But to balance that fact, the Justice Minister is the only minister who comes from the left and say, that's right, the police can do everything, the judges have powers, and there are rules to be considered. The rule of law will have to be observed, even though many on the National Front and the right wing of the Republican Party would like sometimes that we forget some of the principles of law and that we change some of the law. So up to now, so we see these tensions. So it's quite a strange government, and that's why it could crack from outside, but it could also crack from within. If they wanted to put really tough immigration laws, for example, many people who are in government, many of the ministers who come from the Macron camp, would not vote for it and would join other parties in a vote of no confidence. So Barnier is on a hot seat. He's surrounded, is already cornered by the two parties on the right and the left, and within his own government, he has some people who don't see eye to eye with some other members of the government. So difficult, a difficult boat to navigate.
Thank you, Jack. Nigel, just on the issues facing France, I mean, Barnier needs to hit the ground running and get this right, doesn't he? Because Europe needs a strong France.
Yes, very much so.
Germany's struggling. France has huge problems. I mean, the prize is colossal if he gets this right.
Yes, but time is against him. He's got to get his budget to lawmakers in a matter of days now. So that's got to be sorted out. The problems he's got ahead are things like that the debt's running at 110% of GDP. EU rules say it must be 60. He's still got to negotiate with the EU. That's also got to try and stay in power in the first place and hope that the left don't try and topple him. And then, of course, immigration. Every European country is facing a problem with immigration. The choice is what he does about it. He's appointed an interior minister who is hardline on immigration. But that also then will take him into conflict with the European Convention on Human Rights and international law.
So, in short, a very, very busy in-tray and not a huge amount of time to sort it out.
Basically, that's it, yes.
Yeah. Nabila, talk to me about Marine Le Pen and the National Rally Party. What will her strategy be now, knowing that she can pull the rug from under this French government at any time she wants?
Well, dare I say, Barnier's appointment as Prime Minister is quite convenient for the National Rally and for the far right in general. Some commentators have already started to refer to Mr. Barnier as being far right. He has very tough views on immigration, and they are very much aligned with the far right National Rally. He's called for a freeze on immigration from outside the EU, for example, and he's been describing immigration as being, and I quote, out of control. And in his first short speech as Prime Minister, he prioritized immigration, security, and the cost of living in that order. And there's no doubt that he has a conservative view of France, to say the least. And he's certainly a social conservative, and indeed has a lot of free market liberal economic views. He's also in the mold of Macron as far as social unrest is concerned. He's passionate about law and order, just like the far right, which means more police on the street and greater punishment for offenders. He wants, for example, 20,000 extra prison places across France, and he will make that will make him very popular with the far right. And this might be the main reason why Mr. Macron has in fact brought him in.
Just on that point, Jacques, what do you think Le Pen will do? Is she happy to just sit back and watch this unravel and then await the presidential elections when she will challenge a weakened Macron?
Yes, obviously, another thing that's polluting the game for Barnier is all the presidential ambitions of people in the shadows, none other than Le Pen. And you also have, on the left, you have Mélenchon. Let's not forget Mélenchon, who just doesn't want Mélenchon, he wants an election as quickly, as soon as possible. And he'd like to create chaos. And that's why his push is prevented the left from participating in a coalition government. He doesn't want, he's not interested in the common interest, the common good. He's interested in his own political game, which is to create chaos in France so that eventually Macron will have to resign, and there will be a presidential election, and it will be a head-to-head between him and Marine Le Pen. Both of them are part of the same act, and all have this vision of facing each other because they know that if they faced anyone else, they would lose, both of them, even Marine Le Pen, even with the degree of popularity that she has now. So you have that. So which game will Marine Le Pen play? I reckon that in the beginning, she will be she will want to show that she's mature, that the party is mature, considers policies, etc. And they won't try to rock the boat too quickly until comes a time when she thinks the time is right or the policy issue is right. But for that, let's not forget that she can't by herself bring down the government. She's not completely a kingmaker. She can only bring down the government if the left vote against the government. And on which issues? There's only one issue on which both agrees: put an end to pensions reform. Will that be the issue? I don't know.
Thanks, Jack. I just want to move back to Nigel just briefly.
Yeah.
Nigel,
Okay.
how do you think Starmer will get on with Barnier? Obviously, they weren't involved in Brexit negotiations together, but they know each other. And can you see them getting along, building Anglo-French relations?
I mean, recently Keir Starmer has been with Giorgia Meloni over in Italy. Now, their politics are so far apart that it was a surprise how well they got on. So, yes, I think that when it comes to Michel Barnier, certainly the Prime Minister can get on with him. Also, the great thing is that Michel Barnier knows the British because he negotiated with or against them, depending how you look at it. Didn't like Lord Frost, our negotiator, very much. But
I don't
anyway,
think anybody did they?
That seems to be the case. But yes, because he knows us, I'm sure Keir Starmer will have a good relationship with him.
Nabila, just final few questions. How long do you give this French government?
Well, it might be very short-lived, and they have, but it might be that they're facing a vote of no confidence, quite soon, actually. But not least of all because of this formation of a coalition of losers, if you like. I think, unlike what Jack said earlier, when it comes to forming a government, the kingmaker remains the president of France. Yes, officially, the prime minister chooses his cabinet, but he would have received much guidance from the president himself, who would have approved of the ministers. And there will be some challenges for this new government, not least of all because there are some hard right conservatives in the new government, including Bruno Retailleau, the new interior minister, who has linked law and order problems with what he called ethnic regression amongst immigrants. And he's one of these old-style reactionary who cannot accept rapid changes in the world caused by mass communication and relatively easy travel opportunities. And he blames second and third generation immigrants for being less well integrated than their parents and grandparents, for example. Demonstration.
The clock has beaten us. The clock has beaten us. Time will tell. Jacques, thanks to you and Nigel here in the studio as well. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.